I learned about how the design of Camden Yards was very intentional in reconnecting um, to the history of the industrial areas, especially the preservation of B&O Warehouse. I thought that was very, very interesting about how um, intentional they were in reconnecting that history. I also found it very interesting how Camden Yards wanted to revitalize the culture of downtown Baltimore and how it wanted to connect directly to that. And I thought that was very interesting, and it kind of served as like a catalyst of economic and cultural change.
Oh, I learned a lot of things, but I really learned about the urgency the ballpark was created in. So prior to the creation of Camden Yards, the Orioles left in '83, and I knew that, but I didn't know how much of an impact that really had on the creation of Camden Yards and how the ownership of the Orioles, the state government, and the governor of Maryland really all had to come together, even though they're all in somewhat opposing sides, to create Camden Yards, and that there was a lot of tension and and everything was riding on this one ballpark to keep professional sports in Maryland.
So something my group mate Andrew and I found pretty interesting was that there used to be fans on the field, which sounds crazy now, but in the outfield there used to be rows of fans who would stand there on the field if they didn't have seats at the game. And the front row would actually hold a rope, which is pretty crazy, on the field. And if the ball bounced them, it would be ruled a ground rule double, which, I mean, as baseball fans now, it's just crazy to think about that could ever be a possibility, but way back when it was.
Politics and the ins and out, I didn't realize how much public pushback there was with building the stadium. But aside from that, it was like the small details about the stadium that I didn't really know about. Like I didn't know the foul poles came from Old Memorial Stadium, and there was where they built the outfield, Babe Ruth's dad owned a bar there at one point. So it was cool learning all those small details. But I mean, the biggest thing I learned over anything was just being able to talk to the people that were involved and learning just how to effectively interview someone about an event that happened, 3 decades ago, that even though they might not remember it fully, there's sort of tricks and ways that you can jog their memory. So I felt like my interview skills is what really shined and what I learned about myself the most.
So I didn't realize how long it took basically, or like how much Bruce Hoffman and the Maryland Stadium Authority went through, like how much work and effort they went through to get to basically buy the whole entire land. It was really crazy. They had to negotiate with Willard Hackerman and Morton Max, who owned the warehouse. They had to tear all these buildings down, including a high school and a donut factory. So it blew my mind really how much effort went into finding the site for the project.
I would just say how big of an effort it was across a number of different fields. I mentioned before how big culturally it was, but architecturally, design-wise, politically, it was a big thing. Being able to delve into those different aspects, I was on the architecture and design team, but like getting to work with the other students who were working on politics, business, infrastructure, all of that stuff, being able to like go into and to see like how big of an effort it was across those number of areas, and just how historic the B&O Railroad was already to Baltimore. The whole process between trying to decide about keeping it and that being like a big part of like that urban city integration, or getting rid of it and trying to have the stadium have a view of the Baltimore Harbor was really interesting. Finding out that through our interview with Kim McCullough that they found a Civil War pistol in their excavation that was crazy cool. The old Babe Ruth Museum, obviously with him being from Baltimore. So many different really just cool stories across a number of fields. I think that was the coolest thing that like I learned about it, and that's just what made it such a significant project.
Really just all of the moving pieces that went into building it and all of the unique little small designs that made their way into that project. I mean, talking to people like Janet Marie Smith and finding out like how they decided about little designs on the sides of the chairs to like the steel beams that they used instead of, I believe it was concrete at the time that they normally used. I might be wrong about that. But it really was interesting, just like the significance of finding out all the little nitpicky details that went into the signage, the seats, everything else, and really understanding how big of an ordeal this was and how everything had to have so much attention to detail.
I learned a lot about the history of Baltimore, the culture of Baltimore. I think I learned a lot about the history of Baltimore baseball, Babe Ruth and his significance within Baltimore. I learned a lot about the history of baseball itself, looking through photos and evidence. And I think I learned that, honestly, just looking at like old photos from the 70s, the 80s, the 60s, when people were actually watching the game, that baseball is more enjoyable when you are fully immersed in the elements. And I think Camden Yards definitely lets that happen. You know, you're not like, if we were still with the domes and the concrete stuff, we would be on our phones, you know, looking at TikTok with our dopamine brains. But Camden Yards is such a great structure where it's like you're focused on the game, allows you to focus on the game. So I think I've learned that like throughout the passage of time, when people didn't have their phones and these pictures, I've noticed that they are fully immersed in the game. And I think Camden Yards allows that a lot.
How seminal it was, obviously, how influential it was probably the most significant thing I learned, but also probably how influential HOK was to the history of designing ballparks, because they designed Camden Yards in 1992, and then I think it was 22 of the 30 major league ballparks have been created since then, and HOK has worked on majority of them. So for some of them, a good amount of them, I would say they kind of took that retro classic style and the style of kind of designing a ballpark to conform to the city and like uniquely representing that city's identity. They took that idea and just applied it to all the ballparks. So how influential HOK Sport is now Populous was to ballpark architecture was pretty significant.